Hey everyone, welcome to the stream. So this week is a little bit different. Normally I stream on Mondays and Wednesdays, but this week I shifted over both by a day. It actually might become my regular schedule for at least a little while due to differences in the situation at home. So if that's the case, I'll have to update my information on when I'll be streaming and stuff, so stay tuned for that info. So actually a lot has happened since last week. I kind of had a little drive to start working on Vectrexy in between my streams, and mainly because I've been focusing on trying to create something that other users can start downloading and using. So some kind of like pre-release alpha, beta, whatever you want to call it, version. So to that end, I started doing some polished stuff, and I kind of wanted to go through that and show you guys what I've been up to. So last week would have been the second. Let me see here. Was it the second? Looks like it, yeah. So you can see actually quite a bit has happened since see, this is the last commit I made and push I made on last week on Wednesday, and since then I've done all of this here. So let's go through them. Some of them are small, some of them are interesting, so I think we'll just cover some of the more interesting ones. So last week we were working on options. See here, move option to zone, modify options to always spit out an options file with user or default values. So this here was basically what we were working on. We had created this, we had made a modification and had made options a bit more generic. So whereas before we were storing very specific options like the window X, window Y, and all that directly into this option struct, we opted instead for something more generic where you kind of call this add or like a registration for the different types of options and their default values. And then later on you can do like a load options file to load from a file, and you can do afterwards you can do get to get the value for those options. And I mean, along with that change, we come here and we create our options instance here. And then we register a bunch of different options as usual. So this was all what we did last week. Nothing new in there. So after that, what did I do? Oh yeah, so the next change I made was to save the window position and size to options file whenever the window is moved and resized. So basically what I wanted was I wanted to be able to do that thing where when you move the window around or resize it, that I basically save those settings for you, so that the next time you run Vectrexy, it'll open exactly in the same place, the same position, same resolution that you set the last time you were using it. So that's what this change is about. Nothing too complicated there. I just basically split out the code that used to be. Let me just open this here. Yeah, I literally took the code that was at the end of the load, which actually did a little save at the very end, and just put it into its own function called save options file, which I then proceed to call in SDL engine every time we move the window or resize the window. So let's see here, I have to make it a global, but the crux of the change is here. So when we get an SDL window event size changed or an SDL window event moved, at this moment we go and grab the values. So let's say the size, we grab the width and height. If it's moved, we grab the X and Y, and we go ahead, set those options, we update the ones in the options here, and we call save options file. Which actually reminds me, I just wanted to add a to-do item here for this. And I'll say, there's a couple things for options. I want to say, remember file name, so we can just call save, And then there was another thing I wanted to do for options, which was maybe constants for strings. Not sure about that one yet. It's because here I keep repeating myself, right? I repeat my string names here, and I also repeated the file name here. It's not the end of the world, but it's a bit, you know, I could do better than that. All right, so that was that change. Now that's nice because now we can move around and save the window. And I did make another change related to that a little bit later. I'll cover that soon. The next change I made, and again, keep in mind that all of these changes are for improving the user experience, right? The UX. You know, in preparation for making a kind of a release for people to start using, we want the user experience to be nice. Hey, Will25, how's it going? Thanks for joining. So this next change is along those lines. So what I do is, the very first time you run Vectrexy, if you've never run it before, I know this because there's default values for the size and the position. So in that case, I have some special case code that says, let's set the Windows default size to be a percentage of screen zero's resolution. So I think I made it like 80% or 90%. Yeah, 90%. So what that basically boils down to is this very not too complicated change here. So for one, I think I moved this down here, which is not significant, but I think I made the let me line this up. Oh, I'm good, man. Thanks for asking. So formerly I had window width and height set to specific default values. This time around I set them to -1, just so that I know that they haven't been set yet. And then when I grab my values, I check to see, you know, if they're -1. Well, for position, I just tell it to center it. But for width and height, I write here, we do this here. If one dimension isn't set, we reset both to percentage of screen zero's resolution. So if either one is -1, we just say, okay, you know, this has never really been set before. And what I do is I use this STL function to get the display mode for screen 0. And then from there I can get the display's width and height. And then I just have some code, like in case you know, like most monitors are wide, but actually some monitors can be rotated so that, you know, they're taller rather than wide. So I just make sure to handle both cases and choose which end, like which dimension I want to use to take up 90% of the screen. So if it's wider, then what I do is, knowing that the Vectrexy basically wants a tall screen, I use the height of the screen and take 90% of that, and then the width is you know, a scale of the height. So it's like a 4:3 ratio, 3:4 ratio. Now, and if ever these guys are already set, well, what did I do here again? Yeah, okay, that's it. If I can't get display mode, which really shouldn't happen, but I don't know, let's say it fails, I just set them back to the default values we had before. Will25 asks, how did you start coding? That's a good question. I started really programming when I was around 17 years old. I was trying to figure out what I was going to be doing in terms of university, and at the time I really had no idea. I thought actually that I was going to go into business, into studying business administration, or I don't know, marketing or something. Because most of my family are in business or have studied business stuff, like accounting and stuff. I don't really have any engineers or computer scientists in my family. However, I'd grown up basically messing around with computers since I was a kid, and I loved computers. I just hadn't put 2 and 2 together. And it was actually a math teacher of mine. You know, here in Quebec, where I live, we have this school in between high school and university. We call it CEGEP. or college in English, but it's kind of confusing for people from the rest of the world for whom college means, you know, like university. It's some university. It's not quite the same here. So anyway, so think more like grade 12, grade 13. I had this math teacher, was my calculus 2 teacher, and he asked me what I was going to be doing in university. I was actually pretty good at math, so he wondered if I was going to go into anything math related. And I told him, I don't know, you know, I was thinking about business or something. And he asked me, he said, do you like computers? I was like, yeah, I love computers. And he said, have you done any programming? And I hadn't. So he basically lent me this book on Pascal programming. It's kind of a textbook because he used to teach it. He said, here, why don't you give this a shot? So I brought it home and started reading it, and I instantly fell in love with programming. I like devoured that book in very short time, because what I came to realize as I was reading it was that this was my ticket to making my own games. I was always a gamer and I loved games, and all of a sudden it was like as if, you know, someone had given me the book of secret incantations to making my own games. And I remember that this book, which I wish I still had, but you know, I gave it back to the teacher. But anyway, the last chapter was on how to do graphics using Borland graphic, like Turbo Pascal, what's it called again? BGI, Borland Graphics Interface. And I remember just being like, okay, I got to get through this book so I can reach this last chapter. And I pretty much made it through most of the book, even doing most of the exercises. But I think I was maybe 2 or 3 chapters from the end when I finally said, no, okay, that's it. You know, I skipped to the very end and started reading that chapter and immediately started working on my first game. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got into programming. You know, after that, I took a C class, and then I went into computer science and learned C++, and you know, just kept making games, and eventually ended up working in the games industry. So that's how I got started. So after that, what did I write here? Make both loading a ROM and not loading one use the same code path for loading overlays. Oh yeah, this is minor. No use talking about that one. Oh, thanks, Will. I suppose you're a programmer as well, or looking into it, or interested in it. Add main menu bar with items to open ROM, reset, and break. Okay, so this was a cool change, really cool. At this point, I decided, you know, for the user experience, up until now, you know, the way to run my emulator and to open different ROMs is to basically pass them by command line, which is fine, but not great for the user experience. And since I'm using ImGUI, I thought, hey, you know, why don't I look into how menus work and whether I can add a menu bar. And of course, it turns out it's really easy, like everything else in ImGUI. It's really, really easy to do stuff. I really want to start coding. I just don't know how to start. I'm 17. Well, you know what, Will? I was 17 when I started, right? So you're right there at the perfect age. And is your goal to code games, or just to start programming in general? Because I mean, there are so many things you can do today to start programming. So many resources available that definitely were not available when I started. Do you want are you interested in web development, or do you want to do like I don't know, like emulators, like what I'm working on here? Like what kind of like low level systems like stuff, or high level things? Do you have any clue of what interests you? Okay, so yeah, the menu bar thing, just to kind of show here, like I guess I'll open up the diff here. I think it's really nice how it's implemented in ImGUI. I think that didn't work. Hold on. There we go. So you see, all you do is you call this begin main menu bar, and when this function succeeds, you must call end main menu bar. In between that, you can call begin menu to declare all the menu sections in order. So I have here, at this moment, I had file and debugger, and then under each one, and again, you have an end menu to match when it succeeds. And then you call these menu items. And like this is what's cool about immediate mode GUIs, right? You say if this menu item, and you give it a string and a shortcut name, although the shortcut is just a string. It doesn't actually behave on it, so it's up to you to make that happen. But if it returns true, it means that the user clicked on this menu item. So then you just say, in this case, I just do the same thing I do when you hit Control-O actually, which is to add an entry, an event called OpenROM file to my emu events here. So similarly for reset, I have a reset event. So you see, like, I find it really nice. This is the whole thing about immediate mode GUIs, is that rather than like register a callback and handle things in callbacks, you just keep running this over and over in a loop, and once it returns true, it means you got that click on it, you know, so that's really sweet. I really want to program games, willing to do web development too. I'm using Unity and C++, but I feel like I need more intro to programming. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think, you know, you can learn quite a lot by reading other people's code and trying to do like tutorials and stuff online, but I still believe that a good book is well worth your time if you really want to get into it. You know, if you want to learn programming and learn good practices and understand it, you really need to look into books. And actually, there's this really excellent page on Stack Overflow, programming books. I think it was actually about C++ in particular. Yeah, this is it. So if you're particularly interested in C++, this is a really great, here I'll post this in chat. It's a good page. It's basically like a large list of, you know, highly recommended books based on which level you're at. So, you know, I think you're probably going to be looking in the beginner section here. And then you can see here, introductory, no previous programming experience. Introductory with previous programming experience. Books on best practices. So, I mean, I haven't read all of these. I've heard great things about C++ Primer and also about programming principles and practice. This is Bjarne's book. And let's see here. I've read Effective C++ and Effective Modern C++ and Effective STL. These are all Scott Meyer's books. And definitely these are books you want to read after you've learned C++. And these will teach you basically, as it says here, the best practices. And then there's, you know, if you want to continue going, you got the intermediate level here. I've read some of these. So I've read C++ coding standards, some of the C++ templates, some of exceptional. I don't actually own these two, I just have read them online. Yeah, I've read this one here, Modern C++ Design. This is an old book, oldish anyway, I think it's like 2002. But as it says here, it's a groundbreaking book on advanced generic programming techniques, specifically in C++. So this is, I mean, it's, anyway, I liked it. So definitely I would recommend it once you're in more advanced. Now, of course, this is all C++, but if you're doing Unity, you're probably going to be more interested in C#, I guess. And yeah, I don't know about like books just generally on programming. I think the best way to learn programming is to pick a language and start doing a project in there. So, you know, probably these books here are good choices. You want to choose between Cal or computer science for senior year? I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't like. It's hard for me to say because now you're talking about. I guess you're in the States, right? You're in the U.S. We don't really have the same thing over here in Quebec and Canada where I live. So maybe like my gut tells me if you're going to go into computer science or software engineering or something in university, then maybe do a Cal class instead, because I think having a strong math base is really useful in general. If you're going to study something else where you'll get to do math in university instead, maybe a kind of more like like electrical or computer engineering, then maybe do computer science now, and you'll get to study that advanced calculus and math later on. So yeah, it really depends on your future and what you're hoping to do. So, okay, so to get back to it, yeah, so that's it. And I have here a little debugger section with this is just an explicit way to break into the debugger. And I'm gonna show you guys all of this, but since I did more changes, I'll just wait till I get to the end of this and then show you what the emulator state is right now. So add emulation menu, move reset, and pause unpause. So pretty self-explanatory. I just continue to iterate on my menu. I added a section in my README on controls. Again, users who would want to start using the emulator might be a bit unsure about how controls work. And truly what I should be doing is adding a way for... Oh, and no problem, Will. You know, it's my pleasure to dole out advice if it's useful. Obviously, take it with a grain of salt, right? Everyone has their own path, but that's what I know. So yeah, for controls, I mean, eventually I'd really like to be able to offer the user a way to set up their own controls, their own button mapping, and all that stuff. For now, that's not the case. Hey, Michael C. I'm pretty good. How are you doing? So at least, you know, here I'm communicating in the README how the controls work. And I think a lot of people find it a bit confusing when they start using the emulator. So I tried to make it clear. And the idea there is, if there's, here you have like a list of devices and what controls player 1 and 2. So if you have no gamepads plugged in, keyboard controls player 1 and there's no player 2. And I wrote here keyboard bindings as ASDF and arrow keys. Hopefully that's self-explanatory. If you have one gamepad, then it becomes player 1 and the keyboard is player 2. And of course, 2 gamepads are both used to control both players. So that was that. Add link to GitHub repo to README. Change default error handler policy to ignore, which reminds me. Just wanted that before I forget. So GL debug messages off by default. Turn on with an option. Because right now, like the GL debug message, I tried this on different computers, and on some computers I get spammage. And it's not because I'm doing anything wrong, it's just that like I've enabled, you know, too much GL messages. So like the driver is kind of giving me information rather than warnings or errors. Probably I should just reduce the minimum level of stuff that it should send out. I don't know. I gotta look at that. Yeah, I'll say or reduce severity level or something. Okay, improve. Oh yeah, so this was a cool change. So improve overlay detection by computing Levenshtein distance between ROM and overlay names. Okay, so this is interesting. So this actually started with me, you know, looking over, like thinking about the polished version of my emulator and how I would package it. And I'd like to package it with, you know, some key ROMs, like all the commercial ones that at least I support, and maybe some homebrew ones, and overlays. And then I started looking at overlays and thinking, you know, the overlays I have that I've downloaded, they're not really the best quality. And it's really the case. Like they're quite low resolution. The alpha channels are not super clean. I've never been that happy with them. So I started hunting online to see if I could find, you know, a better pack of overlays. And actually, what I found was, what I found was that libretro, which by the way is this really cool like emulator harness, or I don't know what you call it, that hosts a whole bunch of emulator cores. Anyway, libretro has a core for the Vectrex, and I haven't actually tested it. I don't know exactly which one it is, but it also has a set of overlays for the Vectrex. So I went to go take a look at them, and they're really, really high quality. So yeah, they're in here. See, there's a whole bunch of PNGs here. I don't know if it'll actually, let me see here. Will it actually show? Yeah, there you go. So like really, really nice, clean alphas, high quality ones. And so I was like, whoa, this is really cool, right? So I downloaded them and tried them with my emulator, and it worked, although I had some issue because some of the names and the way that the files were named here didn't really match the way my files were named. And the algorithm that I had put together, I had kind of like a fuzzy match algorithm, but it wasn't really that good. I was kind of trying to break down the title into different words and trying to do kind of like a word match, and really it wasn't working that well. And in here, you know, a lot of them were kind of, you know, have no underscore, like armor attack here. And I was like, do I really want to be parsing out camel case to split words? I was like, this sucks, you know? So two things happened. First, I wrote to the guys, like to the, I opened up an issue on libretro here, overlay borders, and I think I had it here. I opened up an issue and asked them whether it would be okay for me to package these overlays along with my own emulator, because it's using an MIT license, so I just wanted to know if they had any preference for attribution, if that was okay. And they answered and said, you know, it should be fine, just mention the people who have actually authored them. So I did exactly that. I've added their names to the README, so you'll see that. So I do give the attribution I should. And the other thing was, now I wanted to be able to match these, right? So I decided, rather than do this kind of weak splitting of words, I decided instead to do this Levenstein distance thing. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's really kind of cool. So the Levenstein distance is this algorithm, right, for strings, where given like two pairs of strings, it basically measures the number of insertions, deletions, or substitutions that you have to make in order to make the first word become the second word, right? So it's like a measure of the number of operations you'd have to do to make one word become the other. And so clearly, if the two words are similar, or the two phrases are very similar, then the number of these single character edits would be lower, right? And obviously, if they're really far apart, then the number of edits, the Levenstein distance, would be much larger. So that's kind of cool, right? I thought this sounds like the perfect tool for the task, because most of the pairings of names are very, very similar. It's just like minor things, right? Like there's an underscore or no underscore. Sometimes there's a couple of extra words in there, but for the most part, they're quite similar. So I decided to implement this, and so I basically grabbed what I decided to do is I took the base implementation here, this like naive recursive implementation that's like super inefficient. Just a second. Okay, actually just hold on 1 second, I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, so I took this really naive approach and I thought, you know, whatever, it should be fine. My strings are short. And actually, it turned out to be extremely slow. And it says it here, this implementation is very inefficient because it recomputes the Levenstein distance of the same substrings many times. So I was like, that sucks, you know. And then it goes on to explain, you know, more optimal ways to do it. It says one right here, a more efficient method would be to never repeat the distance calculation. And it gives one way to do that, where you kind of pre-compute the distances in this table and you use lookups in the table. So I was like, yeah, you know, feeling kind of lazy, didn't want to do that. So I thought maybe I'll just slightly modify this to avoid recomputing for specific input strings, by storing them in a little hash table. And I'm really happy with how that turned out because it totally worked. I don't know if I'll be able to really show. I thought it was kind of interesting, so maybe I'll try and explain what I did there. So here's the function, the Levenshtein distance, and like pretty much everything you see except for like this section, and yeah, let's say remove this and remove this. This is basically exactly the algorithm that you see here on Wikipedia. You know, like let me see here. You know, and I mean, it's slightly different data types and stuff because it's not in C, but like I take two strings and compute I check the base case and return the size of the other one. I do a little cost computation here. Then I basically do, like it says here, I recursively call the Levenshtein distance and pick the smallest of the three. And so you can see it's the same algorithm, right? But what I do to make it faster is I added a cache. And the cache is kind of interesting. So I make use of a few things here. So I make use of unordered map, which is something that was introduced in C++ 11, I think it was. But I also make use of string view. And this is actually the first time I use string view. And now I'm going to use it like all the time. So string view is really cool. It's a view on a string, and it's implemented as a pointer, like a char star pointer to the beginning of a string and a length. And so it's a non-owning view, right? So you have to be careful with these things because if you have a view on a string and then that string goes out of scope, well, your view will basically be invalid and undefined if you try to access it. So that's the one thing to be aware of, right? Like any pointer, basically. But what's cool is that what I did here is I created an unordered map of string view to an unordered map of string view and int. So the idea there is that you look up the first string, then the second string, and then that maps to a value, which is the Levenshtein distance that would have been computed for that pair of first string and second string. And so all I did was just add this LD cache here as a third parameter. And when I get to here, I check, I grab the first layer of the cache here. So cache of S is for the first string. And I check, is T in there? And if it isn't there, well, then I just return the value. Otherwise, we continue and we do our computation. We store the result of the three here, the minimum result here, just like in the algorithm. And then I add it to the cache for the T, for the second string. And just this change, right, sped it up like a crazy amount. Like basically you don't even feel it anymore. Before that, it was actually really slow every time I'd start my emulator because it would get caught up in this really slow recursive algorithm. So I thought that was kind of neat. The neat bit about this is the fact that I'm using string view in here because there's absolutely no string allocations, right? There are allocations for the unordered map, like internally where it will end up creating these buckets for the hash table. But apart from that, and that shouldn't happen too often, but apart from that, the actual strings themselves, they're just pointers. And I know that the strings for the whole, the lifetime of this recursive algorithm, those strings remain on the stack or whatever. They don't go out of scope, so there's nothing unsafe about it. So I was kind of happy about that. I just thought that was like a really easy optimization to make to a simple implementation of the Levenshtein distance. All right, let's keep going. Okay, this is minor, just moved the function into the CPP file. Save window maximize state. Oh yeah, so this kind of goes with the change I talked about earlier, which was I would save the position and size of the window to the options file so that the next time around when you open it, it would have that size and position. Except that one of the problems I had is if you maximize the window and then close the application, the next time you launched it, it would start in a non-maximized or restored state, but would have the dimensions of your full screen as though it had been maximized. And I just thought that kind of was really weird. It's not what you expect. So instead, what I did here was I saved this, whether or not you were in a maximized state. So I added a window maximized option. which we default to false. And then I detect if you are, when you go, when you change the position or the size, I only save the window width and height and the position if you're not maximized right now. And of course, when you do maximize, I save that option as well, like whether you are maximized or not. So basically, what this means is whenever you maximize your window and then kill your program and then start it again, it'll start maximized because I remember that. But if you restore it, it'll go back to whatever original width and height and position you had before you had maximized. So it feels very natural. It feels like exactly what you would expect. So that's what this change is about. Added a credits section to the README. This is where I call out those authors of the overlays. And also I went ahead and called out the authors or people who worked on the different third parties that I'm making use of because I think they deserve to be credited. I didn't write everything in there, right? I added a menu file exit and renamed debugger to debug and added a show hide debug window, so I'll be demonstrating that soon enough. Make pause and debug window bool toggles, just a little option that's kind of cute in ImGUI. Here I decided rather than showing the frame rate in the title bar of the window, I instead now show it in the right side of the menu bar, which is kind of nice. You'll see that soon. This is just a git ignore. I added a option for the help about. It's very common in most applications, like here, help about. So I did that as well. And in there I just basically call out I give the title, my name is in there, and I have links to GitHub and also a way to open up the README from there so that you can go and read more about it. So that's kind of cute. Pause game. So this was kind of cute. So this was a change where, when interacting with the menu, it kind of sucked that the game was still running because a lot of times you want to do stuff in the menu and you want the game to be paused. So what I do is, in this change, is I pause the game while you're interacting with the menu. And this is kind of a neat little change. I think it might be worth taking just a quick look at it. And the reason why I say this is a neat change is because this is kind of like an idiom that I tend to use even at work and in other code bases. So, pausing, or like, for example, when I've worked in other games, things like, fading a screen to black, for instance, or fading it back in, fading out, fading in. These are the kinds of things that if you're not careful, you find yourself where with many systems fighting with each other. Like one system will say, fade in, while another system says, no, fade out, or fade in now. And then you end up with like this problem of who's the owner of the fade in or fade out right now. And pausing is the same thing, right? I have control over the pause at the game level, with pressing the P or pressing start. But I also want another source for pausing, which is the menu, and they're not the same, right? So what I do is, rather than have a single bool and have the different systems just try and tackle this, hit this bool with true and false values, I replace the bool with an array of bool, and it's an array of pause source size, and in this case I have two sources, game and menu. And then what I do, you'll see how this all comes together. I have this function called isPaused, and we'll consider you to be in a pause state if at least one of those entries in that array is true, right? So like if the game says we're not paused, but the menu says we are, then we're paused. Or conversely, if the game says we're paused, but not the menu, we're still paused. So the only way for us to be not paused is if both the game and the menu are not saying we're paused. So it's not complicated. It's a simple solution, but it's an elegant one, and it really shows up a lot. Like I said, for stuff like in a game where maybe you have a bunch of scripts that control when you want to do cinematic fade in, fade out, and stuff like that. But perhaps in the game you have this object you interact with, and then that object also does a fade in and fade out. Well, you don't want that thing to be you know, have some kind of race condition with the fading in and out that's being set by the typical game level script, right? So what you do is you split the two. You make an array of fade in, fade out states with one, and then there's an entry for each source that can go and set that. And then you have this one place that just says, you know, we'll fade out if everyone says we fade out, or if no one says we fade, if only one person says. You make some rule, you know. Or sometimes what you might do is make a priority system. You know what I mean? Like we fade out if the highest priority thing says we should fade out. You know what I mean? So things like that. These are all along the same lines. So in here, I think I just I factored out this update pause state so that it comes out of this update input or update frame time. And here I pass it, so formerly, it's a bit hard to see, but formerly I was passing it this bool g paused. Now the update pause state gets the game source paused. And then in here, in the menu, if we're interacting with the main menu at all, or with any, okay, so that's it, sorry. In the begin main menu, we always say that we're not paused for the menu. But if file returns true, or emulation, or debug, or help, if any of these return true, it means that we're actually interacting with that menu specifically. And it's in those cases where we set this value to true. I also have another thing for the about Vectrexy modal dialog, so that as well, if that's open, I set it to true. And that's it. You know, that pretty much gives us what we want. So I'll demonstrate that as well. This is recurse subdirectories and finding overlays, and add sections on overlays to readme. So nothing too interesting there. So let's get finally to how the emulator is looking right now. So here we go. This is the emulator. Actually, let me change the. I think I changed the default ROM. So I was trying something. I would like to actually see the overlay. Yeah. Here. There we go. So this is what this is looking like right now. So this is the 90% thing I was talking about. If you didn't have an options file, I went ahead and created one and set itself to fit the zeroth display to 90% of the height. So I think this is a pretty nice way to kind of be presented with it. Up here you can see there's the frame rate in the top right corner, as we were saying. You may also notice, if you've been paying attention in former streams, that this overlay is a lot nicer than the one I used to have. Like, this is just a much higher quality overlay. Just high resolution, clean curves and corners. The other one was super aliased and really looked terrible, actually. But it was all I could find, right? So I'm just really glad to have this. I find it adds that, like, that edge, you know? Everything just looks clean. Okay, so here's the menu, and I was talking about it, you know, pausing. So let's say, for example, if I interact here, you can see like everything just paused, right? And if I click away, we resume. So that's sort of what I mean, right? And in fact, this is kind of cute, right? If you go here to emulation, you actually have a paused entry here. So if I click that, now we're always paused. You see? Whether I'm interacting with the menu or not, we're paused. And in fact, if I hit P here, you can see that the pause checkbox there goes on and off. So that all works, you know, different pause sources. You can do file open ROM, and you get the open ROM dialog, which is kind of nice. You have obviously exit, reset pause. In debug, we have this entry for debug window, and that opens that window that I often have open when I'm messing around with my emulator, and this is basically where you can play with what I call debug options for now. Some of these will be promoted to proper options, you know, not debug options, but like just options. And some of these will just disappear. They're really just there for me while I'm developing. So that's really nice. I have here break into debugger. So if you don't know, it's Control-C, but now you can do it from the menu, and it informs you that you can. So then you're back in here, and I mean, I guess maybe I was thinking maybe I should detect the very first time you ever break into debugger and show the help or something, but you know, I don't think I'm not too worried about it. And then you have the about here, which is kind of cute. So you see the help about, and everything fades And this is really ImGUI just doing its thing. And in here I have a little dialog, and you know, you got this link here so you can click on it and it'll actually open in a browser. You have this README here, which also kind of tries to open something if you click on it. I think what it's going to do is, oh yeah, you don't see it, but it's giving me the Windows 10, how do you want to open this file, and then you can pick, like I'll pick Notepad here, and then the README opens up here. So that's kind of neat. So yeah, I think, oh yeah, and let me show you about resizing and positioning. So let's say I position it up here and at this size, right? And I kill the application. If I run it again, it opens up exactly as it was before, in this corner with this size. If I maximize and kill it, the next time I run it, it should be maximized, and it is. And if I restore, it restores back to the position it had previously. So that's really nice, I think. I think there's no surprises, you know, for users of the emulator there. And oops, sorry, jumping around everywhere there. And I also just kind of wanted to show you what the options file looks like. So there's the options file, and in here you can see now that it's remembered the window height and width we picked, and the window X and Y position, that fact of whether it was maximized or not, and you know, whether the debug window was open. This one actually I'm not really saving. Like right now, if you run the emulator and you show the debug window and then close it, it doesn't remember that it was open the last time. So that's something I think I added an element, like a thing to my to-do list to do that, or did I? No, actually I didn't, so let's do that. Oh no, remember file name, maybe constants. I'll just add an entry here. Remember or save as unchanged. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been up to. At the same time, I've also been working on figuring out how to package Vectrexy, and I'm using AppVeyor for now, and I'm trying to figure out where to upload my builds to and how to package all that. And I realized, like, I had this FTP space from my ISP that like dates back from a really long time ago. They don't offer space anymore. They used to, like back in the old days when you'd get an account with this ISP, they'd give you some web space and some space for, like, yeah, to host your website. And they discontinued that service, but because I'm an old client, I still had it. So I thought, cool, you know, I'll just use that space to host my files. Turns out that it still has the same max that it had back in like 1998 or whatever, which is like 5 megs, which is really small. And so I totally bust that when I package up my emulator with ROMs and overlays and everything. I can't even upload it to the FTP. So I'm looking now at alternates. Like I might, you know, I might pay for some hosting somewhere, or maybe get some S3 hosting on Amazon. I don't know. I'm looking at different options. One option, of course, is to use GitHub releases, but that entails having to tag each one of my commits, and I sort of don't want to do that yet. I do want to use releases when I start tagging official versions, but for now I just want to kind of have like a pre-release version for every commit that I create. Literally just the last version for the last commit. I think that's, you know, good enough for now. But again, I need to have some space, so I can't really use GitHub releases for that. So if anybody has like a recommendation for something I should look at, maybe a cheap option. I kind of been out of the web hosting game for a while, or, you know, AWS. I haven't really tried any of that. So if anybody knows a lot about that and can recommend where I should look for space, let me know. Actually, you know what? I'll be right back. I'm just going to go get some water. All right. When you speak for like an hour, you get really thirsty. Okay, so that was a long explanation. So let's get back to it. So there's still a couple more UX things I wanna work on. Mainly it's these things here. So let me see if I can bang these out. Yeah, so one of the things I want to look at is this. If there's a ROMs folder detected at the root, open it by default when using the Open ROM dialog. So let me get the, I have this like massive folder full of ROMs that I've been using, but actually I've kind of handpicked the ROMs that I want to package, and let me see here. Yeah, I'm gonna fix all this. Just let me see here. How do I? Okay. So let's say, I think overlays. Okay, these are gonna rename them for now. I'm gonna copy, I have an overlays folder here. So this is the one I'm gonna be packaging when people download my emulator. So this overlays folder actually has 2 subfolders in it, and I guess I don't really need these 1 and 2 in there. I just kind of did that for whatever. I think I did this because I was thinking about order in which it would search, but actually it's not necessary, so probably just like this is fine. So in here I have the libretro ones that we were talking about earlier, the really high quality ones. And so those are the ones I really want to use for all of these ROMs. And then I have these ones are ones I downloaded as a pack from Vectrex World. These are the old ones I've been using. And I just went in and selected a subset of the ones that I don't have in the other set. And they're really for homebrew games that other people have made. So I thought they're kind of nice, and I included those homebrew games. I think that's okay. I don't know if it's not allowed or anything. I'll try to find out. So those are the overlays, and then I have here a ROMs folder. And there you go. That's the list of all the ROMs. There's not many of them, but these are all the ones that are the commercial ones that don't include LightPen, don't include 3D Imager. And of course the homebrew ones. So all of these, all of these should work with overlays. Oops. So like, if we do this. So this is one. And what I want is, if you do like file open here, if there's a ROMs folder in the root directory, I would like for it to actually open directly in the ROMs folder. And that's actually the case when we'll be packaging it. So I like to do that. Because you see, like if I do file open again, I think the second, if I actually open one, it'll remember. But if I don't, then, or if I close and reopen, it'll go back to, opening at the root, because that's the current working directory. So yeah. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, like the quality, like this one here, Armor Attack, this is one I've played many times with the old one. And here you can actually see the detail in the overlay. It's so cool to actually see all this detail in there. Oh, I think I still have my gamepad here. Like, I find it looks so much better. So okay, so let's get this thing working. I might have to do some modifications to how I do open file dialog, and I think that was in platform. Okay, so this is open file dialog. Right now I specify a title, a filter name, and filter types. But I do not specify a default folder to open in, and I should be able to do that because, see here, initial directory. And right now I'm just passing it the current directory. But what we'll do instead is we'll actually make that an option. And what should I do for this? Should I pass in? I'm wondering if I should use file system for this, like fspath or something. You know what? Actually, that reminds me. Maybe before I get started on this, I've noticed, I think that Visual Studio, the latest one I updated to, includes a file system implementation, a std file system implementation. Which means I might be able to stop doing that weird, let me see, namespace, fs. Yeah, I'm using experimental, and I have it everywhere, should be std file system. Let me see if that actually works now. it's kind of important that we stop using experimental, because when I make this when I port this to Linux, for instance, I want it, using Clang or GCC, I won't be able to use the experimental one. It should really be stood file system. So, okay, that looks like it worked. So let me see if I can do that everywhere. Okay, great. That's cool. Totally worked. I was wondering if there was like some API difference between the experimental version and mine, or if there is, maybe I just wasn't making use of those differences. So it looks like we're good. I'm just gonna make a separate commit for this. Oh yeah, and you know what? While I'm at it, let me delete these because I don't need them. So use instead of stood experimental. So this is something that Visual Studio fairly recently added, proper stood file system implementation which is for C++ 17. So I had to actually update Visual Studio for this to work, and I try to keep it up to date, so we should be good now. All right, so now we have that. We go back to platform. Oh yes. See, I just updated Visual Studio like just before the stream, and this is kind of cool. There's now an option. So Visual Studio does its own like formatting, right? It's always had its own kind of text formatting based on the language. So for example, it opens braces underneath and stuff. But they recently added this feature where if you have a Clang format file, it will try to respect your formatting from Clang format even as you type. So you know what? I'm totally interested to see how well that works. I won't be fighting the version that comes with Visual Studio. So that's kind of good. Okay, I think we already have optional, yeah. So here we want to say, and I'll do the usual dance here of, this is a bit unfortunate that it's stood file system everywhere. It's kind of annoying to have to type. Actually, I realized since all of these have defaults, I'm going to have to put a default for this one. I guess I have to do this. Yeah, so sorry, the thing I'm thinking about is that this initial directory thing, I don't really want to always set it. And what I mean by that is I only want to set it the very first time for a given open file dialog. So maybe what I'm going to have to do is keep like a map of title to initial directory, you know, and or like add a title to a set, you know, and if basically if we have that title in the set, then I just ignore the initial directory. So we use whatever the last one was that you open. So that for subsequent opens, I won't force you into this initial directory. But the very, very first time, although maybe the right thing to do is to just save the last one you use. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, you know what? I'll keep it simple for now, and we'll try and make it more sophisticated if we need it. Alright, so if we have an initial directory, I want to use its value or, but actually it's not going to be its value, is it? It's going to be an fs path. So the type will be different. Let me see. Yeah, was it again? String, I think. I don't remember if this returns a temporary though. Oh, it does. So this won't work. One doesn't like this. Okay, so I think this should work. Right now I'm not actually passing in an initial directory, but that means that when I do call it, it should still use the current directory, which would be the root, or no, the current working directory, whatever that is. So let's see, initial directory is null opt, so we should get, yeah, the directory that came from here. Okay, so, yeah. So now if we go to where we call open file dialog, Let's see what happens here. Hit Control O. Yeah, let me just close options because it keeps getting in the way. Alright, so we have an initial directory. It's called ROMs. So that's what we end up using. So we open directly into ROM. So that worked. And if we open again, well, we still have this initial directory. So again, we open there. So the one bad thing right now with this implementation is, should I go and let's say into another folder, like we used to have over here, and pick up a ROM and hit Control O, we're gonna go back to, oh no, it actually gets respected. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so the open file dialog takes care of it for us. And I guess that makes sense. Really, it internally tracks its own map of when was the first time. So that's actually perfect. Let's make a small note of that. Note that on Windows, it will only use the initial directory the very first time a dialog is open for a given title and application instance. Afterwards, this parameter is ignored and Windows uses the last path automatically. Cool. Alright, so that wasn't so hard. And I'll try when I don't have a ROMs directory. That's actually something I should have checked. Yeah, what if we don't have that path? Oh yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so I might have to change this a little bit. Because let's say we rename our ROMs folder here, right? Now we're going to try and open a ROMs folder, but we won't find one. What will it use? So I guess if it fails, it remembers the last one that was used. But what if the last one was ROMs? So let's kill this. This is kind of like I think this must be saved in the registry because it seems to outlast. It's not per application instance. Okay, so here we are in ROMs. Rename. Okay, so there it failed and it just opened in whatever directory. I don't know what it does. I guess it uses the current working directory, which, you know, probably is okay. I don't know. I suppose that's okay. You know what? Let me read about it. Let me really understand the contract here because I'm making some guesses. Alright, the initial directory. The algorithm for selecting initial directory varies on different platforms. Okay, I guess we can ignore 2000 XP Vista. So, if the directory has the same value as was passed the first time the application used an open, for, or save as dialog box, the path most recently selected by the user. Ah, okay. So that's how that works. So it remembers probably like the title and that specific initial directory, and if they're the same, it uses whatever value it last saved. So that's kind of nice. Otherwise, if LPT string file contains a path, that path is the initial directory. Okay, we set that to nothing. Otherwise, if it's null, it specifies the initial. Oh, if it's not null, it specifies the initial directory. If it is null and the current directory contains any file specified filter types, the initial directory is the current directory. Otherwise, the initial directory is the wow, amazing. Is the personal files directory of the current user. Otherwise, the initial directory is the desktop folder. Wow, that is some seriously crazy logic. Especially this here, right? If it's null and the current directory contains files that match the filter types, it'll use it. Otherwise, it'll use the personal directory. And I guess if you don't have a personal directory, then it falls back to the desktop folder, because it doesn't say why this one would fail. But that would be the only thing that makes sense. Okay, so what does this mean for us? I think this means that what it means is that we can always pass ROMs, the one that we want. And if it doesn't exist, that's okay. It'll let you pick a folder and it'll remember it for that, because we'll always be asking for that same pairing. So that's what we saw. And if we were to pass null, yeah, see, I don't really want that behavior. So kind of using the current directory sort of makes sense in that case. So I think that the logic we have here is good. I just need to fix my note. If, how did they say it again? Okay, I think that makes sense. That's all I need to know here. I guess I could, just to be really, really sure. Huh, interesting. I found the ROMs folder. I could do a check to see if the path is valid. Does this work again? Is there like a... And it exists. So if it has a value and it exists, then we want to use that value. Okay, let's do it this way. Okay, so let's see if this works. Now, if we rename ROMs, we should just keep the current directory. That's safer. So it doesn't exist. Initial directory remains current directory, so it should open here. That's good. And then if instead we rename it, and now we use the one in there. So this is pretty straightforward. Perfect. And then, like it said, it'll actually remember if we go in and decide to change our folder for a completely different place and even kill the application. The next time we open and hit Control-O, Windows will conveniently remember, or actually it didn't this time. Why is that? I thought it showed us earlier that it would actually remember. Strange. No, it doesn't remember across application instances. I guess it's per application instance. And maybe I misunderstood what I was looking at. I don't know. If has the same value as was passed the first time the application used an open or save as dialog, the path most recently selected by the user is used as the initial directory. Okay, well, I mean, at this point we should always be getting ROMs, so I don't know. Kind of sucky, isn't it? Then you don't get to override the path. Like if this was, testing, would it behave the same way? This is what it's claiming, I think, across application calls. So now it went here, possibly because it couldn't find the path, right? Let's see. Okay, so now is the last one I opened. If I come in here, and now it remembers. Huh. This is kind of weird, right? So like basically putting in a dummy name may be more useful. It means the first time you won't get the ROMs directory open, but once you're in it, or any ROM directory you choose, subsequent calls across application instances will remember that last one you chose. So it's kind of unfortunate. You can't really have both. And it doesn't quite match up with what it says, right? It actually says if it has the same value, but I guess that's the key, right? So in an instance of an application, the first time you open, if it happens to be a directory that exists, it'll definitely open there. Now, subsequently, if you decide to change directory, it'll remember that for the duration of the application. If you kill the application and open it, it'll behave the same way. If you pass it a valid directory, it'll open there. Now, if you pass it an invalid directory, then it looks in the registry and says, what was the last valid path we opened, that the user chose? And it'll open there. So it's like, if the user decides to keep their ROMs elsewhere and not use the ones I've packaged, they'd probably be kind of annoyed at the fact that they're being forced always into this one ROMs folder. On the other hand, not opening into the ROMs folder in the case where you don't have a separate ROMs directory is just annoying. So you see what I mean? I seem not to be able to have my cake and eat it too here. I guess the only way for this to work would be if there is a way to access that last cached folder. Probably not very easy to do. I guess what I could do, yeah, so you know how like I returned the string here, right? So maybe as a separate task, what I could do is I could remember the last file you ever opened, and then I could pass that in, as the path. Rather than, yeah, I could totally do that. Let me see. I even remember the last open file. Why do I do this again? Oh, I think I was actually trying to solve a problem with the current working directory thing. Oh no, okay. Oh, so it's behaving that way because of me. That's interesting. That's very interesting. What? Let me see something. If I just remove this thing I did, how does it behave? Looks like I was trying to coerce it to do that, open in the same directory as last time using an external solution, which may have not been necessary now that I see it. so let's go back to here. So it remembers that, but if I close and reopen, it'll open in the ROMs folder. Yeah. So actually this like current directory thing that I was doing wasn't really necessary. Oh hey, thanks for the raid, Lofty. You know what? This is my first raid. So welcome everyone. Alright, so yeah, what do I do? Although this kind of file system thing, this might be useful. Anyway, what I was saying was I was gonna try to take the result, remember it, and feed it back in the second time around. And then maybe I could save this to my options file. So what's going on in this thread? So do you mean what am I working on? Because I'm working on a Vectrex emulator. What's up, Zero? So yeah, if you guys don't know what a Vectrex is, it's this 1982-83 console. So this thing right here came out in 1982-83. And I actually own one of these things. It's this really cool video game console with a built-in display, and it's all vector based. So it's yeah, I'll give you a quick little rundown of what it looks like when you use my emulator. So it kind of looks like this. So this is like the built-in game. It's called Mindstorm, and it's a sort of like an Asteroids clone. So yeah, basically, it's actually a black and white display. So, you know, there's an overlay. So you see this is actually what it looks like without the overlay. Yeah, that's some simulated ghosting you're seeing. Oh, hey, thanks for the follow, Fanks Games. Or actually for the hosting. So yeah, there's like simulated ghosting. I'm using shaders here. Basically, the way I'm doing that is I'm simulating how CRTs decay over time. So using a pixel shader, I'm taking all the pixels and I'm making them like approach zero, using like a damped approach. And so you get this kind of ghosting effect and this kind of flickering. Actually, that's reminiscent of old CRTs. And I have a bunch of control on like how fast that happens. You know, like if I make it really slow, you get this kind of ghosting effect. And if I make it really fast, you get almost none with a bunch of flickering. So stuff like that. There's also blur to help with the effect of like this is no blur, and then if you turn on the blur, hey Azin, thanks for the follow. So if you turn on the blur, you get to see a little bit more what a CRT would look like, you know? The kind of like phosphorus glow effect. Oh, thanks. If you're talking about like how it looks, this is actually ImGUI, which is a library for immediate mode GUI for OpenGL and Direct3D. So yeah, this is like one of the games. Yeah, but this is what the Vectrex was like. It's a super cool system. If you could ever get your hands on one, it's a lot of fun. And so I've been working on this emulator for quite a while. I think it's been like over a year. Mostly streaming it here. Oh, you know what? I forgot to actually name the stream correctly. I just realized that. Should be episode 72, not 71. So yeah, what was I working? Yeah, so I'm kind of working on this. I've been working on trying to make a release for the emulator, and so to that end, I've been working on improving the user experience. And right now what I'm looking at is, if you have a ROMs directory in the root, I'd like it to open in the ROMs directory. But if you decide to choose a different directory, because you maybe keep your ROMs somewhere else, I'd like to remember that. So that's what I'm taking a look at. Like here I have a different directory, and so if I open a ROM here, the next time I open it does open in the right place, but if I close and reopen the application, it doesn't remember that. So that could be really annoying for a user. Hey, Fake Pyre, thanks for the follow. See, now it goes back to the ROMs folder here, so that's not really what I want. And it looks like I kind of have like two options to approach this. Either I remember the last ROM you opened and use that as the, for the directory for the next time you launch the application, or what would currently be a simpler solution but maybe less elegant, because it doesn't get me everything I want, is to just put some dummy here for the initial directory. Yes, you're right, actually, Lofty. So what happens with the registry is, like, if you put some dummy here, it remembers like the initial directory string plus the I guess the application name, and then when you open, it goes and remembers this was actually the last place I opened the folder. It says that we're going to use this one. So that's kind of cool. The only thing that's less cool about it is the very first time you're going to run it, the initial directory won't be the one I would like, So it's like the only way for me to kind of have both, to have like the only way for me to have both is to kind of do what I was saying, is add an extra layer of complexity there, which is like remembering myself what was the last ROM you opened. I mean, truthfully, it's not that much more complex, and it kind of would make sense. It would be like, how if you open an emulator, you usually have like a recent menu, so I'd have to save the recents. So I can do that. I can take advantage of my options class that I have. The only thing is I haven't actually no, I won't use the registry directly, if that's what you mean. What I mean is Windows uses the registry. Or if that's what you mean, then yeah, like it's best that I manage it myself, right? So like sort of like over here, I'd want to say, like, if I have a last open file, and I don't know if I like all this auto formatting from the Clang format stuff. It's kind of driving me a bit crazy. I think I'm going to turn it off. Just give me a sec. Nah, that's better. Put a config file in one of the recommended Windows save spots is my suggestion. Yeah, that's pretty much what I've got. I've got a configuration file. It's my options file. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm just gonna add it to the options file here. And this is a file that kind of like, now I've made it so that it auto saves when you change options and stuff. Hey, thanks for the follow, Lofty. So yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to need to expose my options file to the emulator. Right now, it's only known to to the engine, what I call the engine, which is kind of specific, you know, platform specific. But there would be no problem exposing it generally. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So yeah, basically what I'm saying is I'd like to do something like, what is this? It's a path. And, can we know if a path has been set? Probably. Can we ask it? Does it have an operator bool on it? Oh, no, it doesn't. Oh, my IntelliSense file has been broken. This happens every once in a while, so let me just go fix that. Just waiting for IntelliSense to finish parsing at the bottom here. Hello. Okay, so this is not working. That's just annoying. So what did I do to make it redo IntelliSense? So if you go into, you know, like starting from where you have your solution file, you'll have a .vs folder if you're using VS 2017. And then you go in there, there's like your project, there's the version. And then in here you have this browse.vc file. So this is usually the database file you want to delete. In fact, you can probably delete all of this. You know what, let me try that, just to be really doubly sure. So let's say I delete all of that, right? Yes, fake Pyre is right. There is the app data directory where you're supposed to save stuff because you know you have access rights for the current user. That's totally true. Like if someone was to, you know, correctly install my emulator into program files, then I wouldn't be able to write files in that same directory unless you ran with administrative rights or, you know, change the permissions. That is totally true. However, I think, you know, for now I'll keep it simple and write to the current directory because, like a lot of emulators, at least at this stage, I don't have a proper MSI, like a proper installer. I don't expect people to put it in program files, at least not yet. So I think most people kind of keep their emulators in some other directory tree where you typically have write access. And, you know, if eventually that really does become a problem, then yeah, I'll totally do what you're suggesting, which is, you know, asking SDL to give me the user directory and put my files in there. I kind of like keeping things packaged together for now. I've always been more of a fan of that if it's possible, but you're totally right. Yeah, no, IntelliSense is totally like not helping me right now, and I don't know why. Yeah, UWP apps won't do that, and like Windows 10 has become a lot more strict than what like Windows 7 was for the kind of access you have in program files. So you're right. I really should do that. super annoyed with the fact that this is not working. Oh, now it's working. Interesting. I guess it was because I had a compile error. You know, if we go back there, I had this, you know, this is a compile error. And I guess IntelliSense, there's actually a compiler that's running over this code, and it was in a state where it just didn't want to do anything because of this error. But once I fixed the error, then all of a sudden IntelliSense seemed to come back. Yeah, there we go. Okay, good. So empty, I think that's what I was looking for. So what I want to say here is, if it is empty, then use ROMs. Otherwise, use the value of last open file. And in particular, I don't really want the file, I want its folder. So, well, if you convert this to a path, I guess I have to say still learning the file system stuff. Remove file name. Okay, so let's see if this works. So Fake Pirate says the big problem with putting stuff in app data is that it's a hard directory for regular people to get to. Yes. Not only because it's hidden, but because it's directly in user / which is also a hard directory to get to. Yes, that is true. I mean, usually it's in C users, so that's not too bad, right? But you're right, the app data is totally garbage because it's a hidden folder. I mean, another alternative, and I've seen that used sometimes, is to put it in the documents folder, right? So you create a folder under documents, and in fact, Visual Studio does that. Like if I open my documents folder here, you know, Visual Studio keeps folders in there for certain things. So that's a potential. So Will asked, did I fix my FPS issue? Which issue was that again? Do you mean like making the game run quickly? My rendering related issues? Is that what you're referring to? Oh yeah, I wanted to actually test this. Okay, so we're in here. Let's say I open 3D Crazy Coaster. So we come there and we say, oh, I actually missed my breakpoints. Try it again. So it's not for saving, though, it's for opening, right? So you do like a file open to open open a ROM. And so basically what I want to do is, if there's a ROMs directory in the root, which should be the case when we package it, that's what I want to use if you've never selected one before. Now, if you've opened a file before and it happens to be in a different place, I'd rather open back where you had selected your last ROM file. I think that's just a better user experience, you know what I mean? So it's really about the first time versus the subsequent times, how we want it to work. And I think to me the best is always the first time. It's where you most likely want it to be, right? So where the ROMs are stored. But if you happen to have your own ROMs directory and open the ROM somewhere else, then subsequent times should open there. That's sort of how I'm feeling it. So yeah, we got ROMs this time. And now if I do open, this time we should have a last open file. We do. And we come in here, we remove the file name. And so yeah, now see, the initial directory points to where that file was. So that's what we use here. And we open there. So this is good. The next part, of course, is to actually save the last file name into the options. So yeah, that's not going to be completely trivial. Well, not that it's difficult, but I don't typically want to share global variables kind of thing across my project, so I just need to think about how I want to pass this in. Okay, I know what I'll do. I'll do this as a second change. And I'll put a little to do in here. So I don't really need this here. And I'll say to do. So Lofty, what do you do? I mean, obviously you stream. What do you work on? Actually, I guess I wasn't really testing this properly. Let me really pass the initial directory here. It should still work in the same way, actually, but it was not being tested correctly right now. So you're working on a 2D platforming adventure game in SDL2. Nice. Very nice. And are you using OpenGL, or are you using like SDL2's surfaces to do 2D stuff? SDL textures and surfaces. Okay, that's cool. Now I was gonna say, if you are using OpenGL, then you know this ImGUI stuff that I've got going with the file menu and this like debug window thing. I think you were the one remarking about it earlier, or maybe not. But anyway, this is the kind of thing that if you're using OpenGL, you kind of get this. It's really easy to integrate. So that's all I want to mention. Okay, so next test. Last one wasn't there. Okay. All right, man. Thanks for thanks for joining, and thanks for rating. And yeah, catch you next time. I'll try to check out your stream as well. All right, so here we'll say open will open in dialog will open in that directory. Take care, man. Note that if another file, note that if a ROM in another folder is opened, it will use that folder for subsequent open operations until the application is closed. Okay. So now let me, this is sort of what I was thinking in terms of passing my options stuff. So I have this options. This options class here. Yeah, I'm just thinking about how I want to handle this. Okay, I think I know what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do this thing where I'm going to remember oh no, it's namespace. That's right. Namespace alias. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to remove that and just say load and save. Okay, because I want to make it easier. You know, right now I've been passing in the same path over and over to load and save, and that's just not cool. What we'll do is we'll just kind of set it up once. We'll set the file path. And technically speaking, we don't really need these. You know, like you can use as options for like temporary options for a run of the application where you just kind of use add, get, and set, and then these options disappear. But if you like, you'll be able to, I'll just move these up. You could also set a file path, and then load and save can be used. Okay, so if we come back to SDL Engine, Alright. Yeah, the only thing that bothers me is this kind of weird contract between how you want to be able to, you need to kind of register all your types before you actually do the load. We could set the file path earlier, but it's important to do the load after. So maybe I'll put this up here to kind of communicate that. Make sure to add options before loading a bit weird, but it's okay. I'll live with it. So I don't think we ever call load again, but we definitely call save in a few places. I'm going to change those. Instead of save options file, this here would just become save in those two places. So that should be that. So this was another item on my to-do list right here. Remember file path, so we can just save our load save. Sorry. All right, so now about exposing the options. So what I was thinking, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something called the MU context. I have the render context. The MU context will be all kinds of stuff related to emulation. So for instance, we'll pass in the MU events through here. And we'll also pass in options through here. Although, do I really want the ownership of these things to be in here. And maybe not. I think I might use a reference wrapper. These are defined in functional? Really? I'll try and use this. I've had some luck with this. Okay, so it doesn't know what options means. So we have an MU context, and then what I would like to do is, rather than pass the MU events this way, we'll pass it the MU context that way. If I go to my main, that means changing this parameter here. And then if we go back to the engine, where we call this function, it's called frame update. So here we want to pass it an MU context, and really that's made up of MU events and right now G options, like that. So that should build. Or not. Oh, I might have to do std_ref. Around these guys. Okay, great. So this should work, and now we have a way to pass in what we need to from... Oh, we're not... What is this? Oh, yeah. I see. Doesn't like the reference wrapper here. Nah, that's kind of sucky. I could do the get, I suppose. Another way I could fix this though is I could do this. Maybe not auto. What? Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is kind of a thing that sucks about reference wrapper, is that in most cases it'll work, you know, like here it'll implicitly cast to MU events, but like for example, in my template here for find if, I'm just taking some container, right? And it doesn't like it doesn't do any kind of casting because it has no casting. It doesn't know what type we're dealing with, right? So we either need to explicitly cast it, or we could call .get, which returns the thing that the reference wrapper wraps. But the whole thing about reference wrapper is it's supposed to act effectively like a pointer that behaves like a reference. You know, so it's sort of like using a pointer that it must refer to something, but then you can use the dot operator on it. But there are cases like this one where it just kind of falls apart. So that's where you end up with kind of crap like this. Anyway, so it's okay. On the flip side, we're able to use it most of the time like the way we want, so I don't think it's too bad. Alright, so now we have options, which means that... What does it mean? So yeah, it means I can save this last open file here. I suppose I need to register it first. I actually don't have support yet for strings, so I'm going to have to add that. So this should fail because it won't be able to handle string. That's okay. Yeah, there you go. No operator which takes right-hand operator of type string. So we expect that because our variant does not know about strings. But let's teach it. Okay, well that was fun. It actually just totally seemed to have worked. Yeah, I don't trust it too well. Let's actually see if this runs as expected. So we register last open file, and then we do a load, and last open file is there, and it has empty string. Okay. So that's good. So then technically we should be able to save the last open file over here. So we say emu context options dot unfortunately it doesn't want to. Okay, I'll just do this to autocomplete for now. And we'll say set the last open file to this value. And I can actually remove these gets here. This should work. Well, then I don't understand. Does reference wrapper really require you to explicitly I thought I saw that it actually had an operator. Public options refs to reference wrapper operator. I guess you always need to cast for it to know. You know what? I think at this point I'm just better off with a pointer. That's how bad this is. Ah, C++. Alright. So if I go and open any file, let's say this one, I should see that in my options file, it got saved, and it did not. And you know what? That is not too surprising, although I guess I'm not handling errors properly in my options. Now, what about this assert false? Why am I not? Ah, because I'm not in debug. That'll teach me to use assert. Assert's completely useless to me. I really should enable asserts in release. I should use my own assert, really. Any attitude do about that? Okay, so if auto value is equal to getIf stood string, that's as simple as that because we actually want a string. And here, what are we doing here? We're doing from string. Well, we just assign the string. And that's it. That ought to do it. Go open our options file, and still not there. Okay, so let's debug it. So options set options find, I'm going to set the value in there. So options, if we look in the list, last open file does have the path in there, so that's good. And then it's the save that's not doing what we expect, right? And it would be this toString. Did I not do this right? Actually, I'm going to switch to debug here because the optimizations are just making it annoying to debug this. And I should hit asserts if I do something wrong here. So. Alright, so for each option, so here we have the name, so this is going to be more useful. Name, and we have the option. So we're waiting for when it says last. There we go, last open file. There's the value, it's a basic string. So in the toString here, what's happening? Index 3, so we really should enter here, and we do, and we return this string. Okay. I don't understand. Oh no, okay, my breakpoint's in the wrong place. This is what I should be looking for. So yeah, we're gonna hit it on the second, what was it, third one? Yeah, third one. Star value should return the option, which is a string. So we're doing an f out with the name and this string that just got returned. Oh, huh. Okay. Yeah. No, we can totally do this. What the? All right, let's do this. Just to see like what's actually happening here. If I do this instead, will this make more sense? And then we do f out, the name equals, and then s, which has the string in there, and line. You know what I think is happening? I think we're not actually modifying the same options. Oh, that doesn't really make much sense. Let me see. I think I know what's happening. I think I know. Yeah. There it is. Okay, so yeah, all right. This is my fault. It's because basically I passed it a file name to use, and it's always relative to the current directory. And once we opened a file, our current directory became that of the ROM's directory. And you know what? This might be why I had that push pop thing. Okay, maybe it's becoming more clear now. Let me see. Oh no, not quite. So this actually changes the current directory. Okay. Anyway, easy to fix. I'm not sure that I like that the current directory changes, but easy enough to fix. So let me see how I'm going to do this. STL engine. How do you make a path absolute again? FS absolute, okay. I don't know if I should do it here or in the other place. Yeah, maybe I should do it in the other place. So basically we store the path to options as an absolute path. And this way, even when we change current directory, it'll always use the correct directory and everything. I'm also realizing my string, if it has spaces in it, it's probably not going to parse correctly. I might have to change my parser. Yeah. All right, so there's the absolute path we wanted. So if I open a file, and now our options file, which should also be in the right directory, and not this one here. Just delete this. Yeah, even my mgui file, yes, there's a lot of things that change when I change the current directory. I really need to rethink this. But yeah, there it is. You see these spaces here? This is gonna make it fail on load. Because I know how I'm parsing this. I'm using the default parsing for IO streams, and that thing just doesn't, it'll just, you know, stop at white space. So that's not gonna work. But yeah, I think I need to do the thing about remembering. I think I have a utility for that. Do I? Scoped set current directory. Saves current directory, changes to directory of input path, and restores original directory. So this would be like an alternative, right? Where, because we are always controlling now the folder in which you open because we pass it in, we can always make sure that we don't lose the current directory. I wonder if that should be done in open file dialog itself as part of the contract, or whether we should do it on the outside. I don't know. File system. So it would be something like am I using this anywhere? No, not anymore. That's not what I had before, right? Yeah, it really is what I had before. So I was using this for a reason. But in this case, I actually don't need to pass it a directory. So like if I do this, I can even go back and remove this absolute option, technically speaking, and it should work. So I open Vectrex Pong instead. And then options.txt has been updated, and it should have, which one is this one? Oh, right. I know what happened. It still did the same thing because of my scoping is not correct. This is just annoying. Okay, I guess we need both. What I could do here is I could force it to kind of reset over here. Or I guess I could scope this thing here this way. But then I'd lose the result. All of this is bad. But let's do this. No, I guess it shouldn't do it. It kind of makes sense that open file dialog changes the current directory, but I just don't want it in my application. Okay, so the next thing is the parsing. Like I said, it's not going to actually work this time, because if we see here in options.cpp, when we, I could put my breakpoint here. So when we're loading, Oh, it actually did parse correctly. How'd that happen? Oh, okay, I am actually parsing. Okay, sorry, I thought I was parsing it differently. I am totally doing the right thing. So this works. Great. It's always fun when your code works, right? Alright, so there's a line that we wanted. So let's go back to release because it's too slow in debug, and we'll do some tests. And I think we're in business. And this will be my last change for tonight. So if I do open ROM, okay, we're in Vectrexy ROMs, which is not surprising. But what we really want to see is if I go to my other folder, my flat folder here, it's a totally different path, and I open something here. So my options file should show that, yes, there's the path. And I kill this application, and now the next time I run it, oh, actually I didn't, yeah, I'm missing one little piece. It's true. Just realized it as I was testing it. Yes, last open file needs to be initialized to the one from the options. In fact, we don't really need this data member at all, do we? We just use the one in options altogether. Yeah. That's the way to do it. So what we'll do is we'll say options .get so we'll get the last one. If it's empty, we use ROMs. Otherwise, we remove the file name and don't need this, but we will save the last value here. Does that make sense? Actually, we need to save the result here. There we go. Oh yeah, star. There we go. So basically I need to make sure to read the value from the options here. If it's set, we use it, otherwise we use ROMs, and then I resave over it if we've made a change. And there we go. So now we are reading from it and we're opening in ROMs extracted flat. And that's all because it's there. If we go into options and delete this line, we should now open in the ROMs folder, which is what we want for the initial Perfect, we're in the ROMs folder. Beautiful. So I think we've got everything we wanted. So the only thing I'm not super happy about is the reference wrapper stuff. And yeah, the only way I really see making this work otherwise is to store pointers in here rather than reference wrappers. Or to use .get, which is not as cool either. I mean, I suppose it would work. But I'm going to leave it alone for now. I think this is fine. Okay, so what did we do? I can just pick it off my to-do list. Ah, it's actually not here. So what we really did is save last opened ROM to options file. So, and reuse that path when opening ROM. This makes sure that the first time emulator is the first time open ROM will open in the ROMs folder. Whereas subsequent times it will open in the folder of the last ROM loaded. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to push this up to master, to origin master, and yeah, I'm going to call it a night. So those of you who've been watching, thank you very much. I will be streaming again on Thursday night. So yeah, if you want to catch me again, just see me here in 2 nights. So thanks again, everyone, and catch you next time.